The Challenger is a class of medium-sized cruiser in service with Starfleet. Entering service in the 2350s, the ship was initially meant to replace the large number of legacy designs which had served with the fleet since the end of the 23rd century, and were growing increasingly dated compared to latest classes in service with foreign powers. Although the design never succeeded in this lofty goal, it is still a well-liked and popular design in service up to the present day. The ship measured in at 433 meters long, was 259 meters wide, and 120 meters tall. Depending on the year of the vessel's entry into service, a Challenger class was armed with either the Type 9 or Type 10 phaser array, and featured typically 2 torpedo launchers, one each covering the forward and aft arcs of the vessel. The Challenger had a crew of between 300 and 500 officers and men, depending on the mission the vessel was performing, though in some instances the vessel could accommodate safely twice that number for brief periods. The ship could achieve speeds for brief periods of time as high as warp factor 9.4, though at speeds much above warp factor 8, the warp field the vessel projected became increasingly unstable. The ship's cruising speed was anywhere from warp factor 6 to 7.2, depending on urgency. By the 2340s, Starfleet was increasingly aware that large parts of their fleet were growing ever farther behind the curve. However, large parts of the organization had known this for some time, so this was nothing new. Repeated efforts were made to introduce large numbers of new ship classes in the years prior. However, the general galactic peace of the period, the stability of the Federation's borders, and lack of threats caused most of these designs to be cancelled by a mixture of political pressure, lack of funding, or resources being diverted for the refit and modernization of other classes. Although a few designs were built in limited numbers, by the early 2340s many ships were reaching the end of their natural service lives, and the introduction by the nations around the Federation of new cutting-edge designs in widespread service combined to give a sense of urgency to Starfleet to finally introduce large numbers of totally new designs. A major debate soon broke out in the Federation Assembly when Starfleet made public these plans, with many wishing to see funds go towards infrastructure and their own pet projects, pointing out that Starfleet had by far the largest fleet in the known galaxy, and had just laid down many ships of the Ambassador, Rigel, Renaissance, and Wambundu class vessels. Others, quickly dubbed militarists by their opponents, accepted Starfleet's detailed fleet analysis paper submitted before they made their official request at face value, and supported their bid to introduce new designs. The debate raged from the submissions of the fleet analysis paper in 2344 until an unlikely Vulcan-Andorian alliance, both member states previously keeping neutral in the debate, threw their support behind Starfleet and saw resistance crumble. Amusingly, the United Earth representative, who had opposed the plan staunchly the entire way through, apparently asked his Vulcan colleague after the final vote if it was logical for an organization professing peace to build an enormous fleet. To which the Vulcan ambassador allegedly answered that the Vulcans and Andorians had a related saying, that only a fool believes that deliberately making himself weak will discourage the violent man from attacking him. It is not known what the UE representative responded with. With the vote now complete, Starfleet set about planning and developing the ships they would build. New designs of cruisers, escorts, explorers, scouts, frigates, and other designs were prepared, all to have the cutting edge and latest technologies included in their design. This would be the program which would culminate with the commissioning of the Galaxy class of starships in the early 2360s, and the Challenger would be among this family of related designs, though it began its development quite late, with USS Challenger herself not being laid down until 2352. Starfleet designed 3 cruisers in the 2350s program: the large multi-role New Orleans, which was often referred to as a frigate, a fast scout cruiser, the Cheyenne class, and finally the more general-duty small cruiser, the Challenger. On their own, each ship was quite capable, but together they worked to complement one another and the other ships in the program. There was also the very briefly lived Springfield class, which was developed as a potential replacement for the New Orleans after some issues with that class were discovered after the launch of the prototype. However, Springfield production totaled 4 ships, and the design did not go much farther after its own issues were discovered, and New Orleans-class vessels had a number of alterations made to their design. USS Challenger began her trials in 2355 and entered service later that year, although officers and crew initially expressed strong opinions about the vessel's unorthodox appearance. But the ship's spacious crew quarters, advanced features, and overall modernity compared to much of the fleet eventually won their crews over, leading to many a lively debate and occasionally brawl between Challenger crews and other fleet officers debating the aesthetics of the ship. The initial plan called for 40 Challenger-class ships to be constructed. However, following the elections in 2360, this was cut as the new incoming government immediately slashed Starfleet's budget in favor of an ambitious series of terraforming projects throughout Federation space. The final 10 Challengers and all but 9 Cheyennes would be cancelled in exchange for a far less expensive further refit to the Excelsior class and the controversial Niagara class, itself an update of the already in service Rigel class. Starfleet's first encounter with the Borg Collective in 2366 soon saw this decision reversed as the Federation began a program to rapidly build up its forces in preparation for a likely Borg attack. However, by the time the Borg would make such an attack during their aborted invasion of the Federation core and the Battle of Wolf 359, where at least one Challenger participated, none of these newly ordered ships had yet been completed. As a new generation of Starship classes entered service in the late 2360s, such as the Intrepid, production of further Challenger-class ships was ended after 52 ships had been laid down, 48 of which would be completed. In service, the ships proved more than up to any tasks given them. The ship was as capable as combat as she was in exploration and patrol, a useful trait given the chaos and the wars the Federation would find itself in during the 2370s. The Challengers did not serve very much with the battle lines during the war due to their utility outside of the big fleet actions. The ship's firepower, shields, strength, and the proficiency of their crews making them better suited to serve in independent roles, such as patrolling the front line, raiding enemy territory, and conveying messages between worlds and installations in areas where subspace radio was considered less than secure. The 48 Challenger-class ships which were in service were hard-worked during the war, with 13 ships lost in combat and a further 3 vessels damaged beyond repair. With the end of the war, 32 surviving Challenger-class ships have continued in service with assignments such as exploration, patrol, and transport being once more their typical jobs. Challengers are expected to remain in service until the early years of the 25th century and perhaps beyond, ensuring that jokes and strange looks at the ship's oddball appearance will continue to be heard by those serving aboard them for decades to come. I hope that you enjoyed the latest video review. I had hoped to have it out earlier, believe me, but the real world called and other stuff came up. If you did enjoy the video, then please give it a like and follow the channel for more videos like this in the future, as this seems to help appease the YouTube algorithm deity which decides the fate of the channel. As a note, I should mention, because people constantly comment on this on Instagram, when I use terms like budget or expense, I am not meaning money. The Federation does not use currency, and those words do not exclusively relate to money. Instead, I mean that Starfleet lacks the manpower, resources, and time for various projects. That final addendum said, have a good day, stay safe, all that good stuff.